So I was going to wait to do this video, but in light of the report that came out today from Sally Yates in US Soccer and the pervasiveness of everything from emotional abuse, sexual harassment, all of it that came out within the National Women's Soccer League, I felt it was important that I do it today. Now, I think one of the frustrations I've been feeling for quite a while now, when we look at the landscape, we've seen it across, women's soccer. We've seen it across US Gymnastics. We've seen it in other female sports. We've even seen it on the men's side in some sports. Obviously, Jerry Sandusky, everybody knows about that. But it's definitely been pervasive on the women's side. Now, with that said, we've seen people and mostly men, usually this is men that's doing it, who are in positions of power and authority, who are abusing that power and authority in order to control and manipulate, women or boys, and abuse them. At this point, the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts of America, the Southern Baptist, it's everywhere. The rot is everywhere. And it's actually something that I wrote about in my book, is that the rot is in our families. The rot is everywhere. 90% of all, sexual abuse happens from somebody and they're in a position of power and authority over you. But I think the problem that I keep running up against is there's a whole lot of us that know that it's wrong, that know that it's awful. And, in some ways we're surprised when it keeps coming to light. And in some ways we're also not surprised. But I'm also circling back to, what is it at its root cause that allows people to believe that it's acceptable behavior, or I should say acceptable enough behavior to actually do it, and knowing that if they get caught, that there will be some sort of a punishment, or there will be some sort of a reckoning. There's that old adage of, what defines your character is what you do when nobody's looking. And for me, that's really kind of the crux of this, right? On the one hand, we want people to have integrity. We want them to operate in the same way, so that if somebody was watching, would you still do that behavior? And if you are caught, then we want accountability. And when both of those two things fail, accountability, or integrity and then accountability fail, there's so much anger and frustration with everyone that's been abused, and even people that aren't abused that look at abuse like that's horrific. And yet I keep coming back to, so what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong along the way as we are forming these men from boys into men? Is it parenting? Is it, something that's collective, where it's not the parenting, but, it's in the circles, the male circles, and it's when, people don't stand up in those circles and tell somebody else, hey, that's wrong, man. Hey, that's not okay. Is it both? I'm gonna tell you a little story that I kind of feel is relevant here, and maybe part of the problem. So my son, he's a really smart kid, but he's not what you might call street smart. Okay, he doesn't have certain awareness that you would think. And I don't think this is just him. I think this is a lot of kids, actually. So I've had to do a lot of situational awareness on things with him. So for example, when he was younger, right? We all tell our kids, oh, you're not supposed to talk to strangers, and, don't do these things. But we don't really do a lot of situational awareness where we say, what happens if this happens? What should you do? What happens if a stranger talks to you? So I did that to my child, okay? I said, what happens if you're playing outside in the front yard? I said, and a stranger all of a sudden, comes up to you and starts trying to talk to you, right? I said, what do you do? And he went, ignore them. And my initial mom reaction was, you just got snagged and grabbed and put in the white van, right? And I realized in that moment, oh my God, I haven't walked him through mentally, what you're not supposed to do, right? Or how to get out of the situation, or what is bad, what is wrong. I did a similar situation with him once, only about a year or two ago, because he's starting to be in, the teenage years. And I said, what happens if you're at a buddy's house and there's a few of your friends are all there, right? And one of the boys all of a sudden is like, hey, guess what? Let me show you what I got. And he pulls out a gun. I said, what should you do? And again, my son's response kind of freaked me out, because he said, I don't know, try to grab it and take it away from him. And I was like, that is the last fucking thing you should do. I said, what you need to do is very quickly and calmly get the fuck out of there. I'm like, literally, like, find the door, walk the fuck out, and just start walking away. Call one of your parents. We will come get your ass wherever you are. And, part of me sits there and wonders that as parents, and I'm talking about parents, going back at least, 34 years ago, because a lot of these men, these are men now. They're men now. And I just feel like, are we not actively doing situational awareness with our children, specifically our sons, and saying, if you find yourself in this situation, what do you do? I went through a situation with him as well and said, what happens if you happen to be, at a party, for example, and there's a bunch of drinking involved, and you're doing your own thing, and all of a sudden you happen to walk by this room and you see that there's, four guys and a girl in there, and they are, they're raping her, they're doing something wrong. What should you do? Now, a lot of guys, what would they do? They might just walk the fuck away. My son might have been one of those guys like, I don't want to get involved in this. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, you need to call the cops. Like, fucking immediately. Cops, immediately. You need to immediately be an advocate for that woman. And so in these situations as a parent, I found myself that I've had to actually have these kind of tough, situational awareness conversations with my own son to walk him through, what should you do? What is the expected, action that I, as a parent, expect you to take? Because, you're going to find yourself in these situations one day going, well, I was told this shouldn't happen, but what do I do if it does happen? I've been in some of my own situations, right, where it was like, I was told, this shouldn't happen, but then I found myself in it and I went, well, shit, now I'm in it. I'm in the thick of it. What do I do? And I feel like as parents, we don't talk about these hard conversations. We don't talk about, and actually do a situational awareness with our kids, especially our boys, as far as this is the scenario that's happening and what is expected of you. And I feel like we need to do more of that. I feel like we need to be doing that. I think that too many people are making assumptions that other people are just going to do the right thing, that people are just going to assume that people know what to do or are going to act how they're supposed to act. I had a boyfriend once, I had been dating him for like a year and a half. And, in some moment of, I don't even remember what it was, he actually confided in me that, one night, a couple years before, he was drunk and he raped a woman. And I was literally like, oh my God, like, who am I with? And I sit there and I think, what is it that, men feel like they are allowed this power over us as females? What is it that they feel that, grants them the right, to, make these comments? Is it just because that's how it's always been? Because it's always been men overpowering women and men always wanting to, doing whatever they want to women, saying whatever they want to women, acting however they want, and that we're just supposed to take it? Is that it? Is it in the now, in the last, 30 years, is it a little bit more situational awareness that we need to be doing? Like, how do we correct the problem with our boys? Because for me, that's part of it. Like, on the one hand, we can talk about integrity and we can talk about accountability, but really, how do we get to the root and stamp that shit out and make it so it doesn't ever fucking happen? Makes it so that when they sit in this space of integrity, it doesn't even come to their mind to even have that behavior, right? I mean, that's really what I want to get to, is how do we get to that point where it doesn't even cross their fucking minds? And I feel like we are doing a disservice to our boys, and we're not having those conversations because we're making assumptions that, well, they're a good boy, or, well, they're our boys, so of course they wouldn't do that, right? And I think that's pretty bullshit. I'm pretty sure that almost every single one of the mamas of all of these male monsters out there thought their sons were a good boy and would never do that to a woman. I guarantee it. If I was a betting woman, I would bet money on every single one of those mamas thinking that their sons were just great. And I think that's kind of part of the problem, is we're not doing this situational awareness stuff, and we need to. We need to literally be saying, all right, I'm going to walk you through a scenario. What do you do? Tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what you're going to say. Tell me what actions you're going to take. Whether, they're drunk, whether they're not, whether they're a boss or not. I remember when I was 23, 24, at a job, corporate job. And I remember my boss making an offhand comment as he's walking down, the cube aisle that, there's no such thing as sexual harassment here. But he wasn't meaning it as in, like, it doesn't exist. He was meaning it in the context of, that's a joke. Everybody just has to get behind, you're going to have comments, thrown your way. You're going to, have guys look at you and say things and whatever. And at the time, I remember kind of, nervously laughing at it, a little bit like, yeah, it's kind of true, but I remember also being uncomfortable in the moment, like, wait, is that right? And it actually took me, several years before I kind of, moved forward in my life, and I was like, wait, that was so wrong. And it is wrong. And, some of us women, find ourselves, in that position where we feel caught. We feel caught and in fear of, what do we do, right? Because there's wanting to stand up for others, and then at the same time, we end up getting caught in, but are we going to get, fucked over in our lives, right? Are we going to get retaliated against? If we stand up for somebody at our job, is this other boss who's buddy with the person, that somebody is accusing, are they just going to axe you and say, well, it was performance related? And now you're sitting there going, well, I really need this paycheck. I've got two babies at home I got to feed, right? And so we get caught in this really bad place. And yet, again, I don't think we're teaching our sons in the way that we need to be teaching them, how we expect them to navigate life and how we expect them to navigate life with girls. For example, we can tell our boys that, hey, no means no. If a girl says no, it means no. But honestly, I think we need to walk them through that moment. As difficult as that moment may be, walk them through it. You know, you're with a girl, right? Do you have consent? How do you know if you have consent? Did you ask her? Maybe you should ask her. Does that seem uncomfortable? Well, it'd be better if you make sure you ask her, because honestly, at this point, I almost feel like every man needs to like ask that question before they have sexual intercourse with somebody that they want to. Do I have consent? Make it verbal, and then make that the standard, right? That as you go through every single woman you're with, do I have consent? And, you know, maybe that's part of the way that, you know, legitimate men who aren't, you know, doing any kind of, sexual abuse against people, maybe that's how they cover themselves. Well, I can haul in my 4 previous girls I've had sex with and let them, you know, tell you that I ask all my women that, you know, do I have consent, right? That's my pattern. Because I feel like we are not getting to the root of the problem. We're not really gripping the problem at the root level. You know, we're trying to deal with the nasty, ugly, you know, thorny, you know, outer, you know, flowery-like thing we're staring at, the thistle, instead of actually yanking the thistle out from the ground and stopping it before anything actually happens. And I think that's something that we need to put into practice on. You know, you got people who have a hard enough problem, you know, having the birds and the bees conversation. Like, are you fucking kidding me? You know, from my view, it's just biology. Do you want to be a young grandparent or not? You know, do you want to fuck up your kid's life early or not? Have the conversation, man. You know, talk about consent. Talk about the situation. Oh, is it uncomfortable? Well, I don't know. What's more uncomfortable? Having the conversation with your child about consent, or sitting in a fucking courtroom because some, you know, girl has, you know, said to your son that, you know, she never gave consent, or she revoked consent and he didn't stop. What's going to be more uncomfortable for you? And maybe that's how we need to take a look at, you know, teaching our sons as we navigate this life. Because otherwise, I just don't have an answer. But I just know that way too many people, I mean, right now, with the women's side, it is 1 in 3 are sexually abused at the child level. And, you know, pretty much by the time you get to be 30 years old, we're inching closer to 2 out of 3 women are sexually abused in their lifetime. I mean, that's pretty fucking bad. Really bad. So something has to change at an instructional level. And if anybody has any great ideas, I am open to them. I would love to hear somebody else's feedback, somebody else's good idea, suggestion, whatever it may be, that you have to help, you know, stomp this out and cut it out before it actually even happens. Because this isn't working. What we're doing isn't working. And it is causing way too many problems in our society. And, you know, too many women are, you know, being damaged for the rest of your life. And it's bullshit. It's total bullshit. So, I mean, if you've got comments on this, drop them. Drop them in the comment section. I want to hear it. I do. And if you like the video, hit like on it. Otherwise, subscribe to my channel. I'm going to have, you know, a lot of stuff on trauma survivors, etc. So subscribe to my channel. And if you need any help with life coaching, especially if it's, you know, trauma survivor based, let me know. But, you know, hopefully you have a better day than a lot of other women are today. Because today was a pretty hard day to read that report.